So I am super excited to chat with Laurie Villarreal as we are going to talk about blood sugar imbalances. Really looking forward to this conversation. And I'm going to just dive right into Laurie's impressive bio here. So, Laurie Villarreal helps high achieving, mission driven women regain control of their weight, health, and hormones in midlife so they can have more energy to pursue their bold goals and active lifestyles without restrictive diets, stacks of supplements, or overhauling their lives. Her unique method artfully blends the science of real time biofeedback with innate body wisdom to help zoom in on the unique triggers and tweaks that support your body in turning down physiological stress to turn up restoration and healing. With a client list spanning the globe and over 20 years of experience in the health and wellness space, you may have also seen her in publications such as Self Magazine or Thrive Global, or sharing the stage with names such as Dr. Joe Dispenza and JJ Virgin. She's also a national board certified health coach, functional nutrition practitioner, and a longtime endurance athlete and movement educator turned hormone specialist after being challenged with her own hard to solve hormone health issues. Laurie not only understands her client's journey and challenges, she's been there too. And welcome, Laurie.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, same here. I'm looking forward to it as well. And yeah, this is going to be a great conversation talking about blood sugar imbalances, continuous glucose monitors. But I want to talk about a little bit of your background because you have your own thyroid journey, which kind of led to you focusing on what you help people with now, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go ahead. If you could give a little bit of that story.
Yeah, sure. It's probably similar to a lot of people you've worked with, maybe even yourself. And I I struggled for a number of years, actually, where I didn't exactly know what was going on with my health at the time. I was an athlete and an endurance coach and trainer. And, at the time I understood a lot about health, balancing stress, recovery, eating well, all of those things. I paid attention to all of those things for decades. And that was a really important piece of being an endurance athlete. Yet, for 2 years, I was noticing just small insignificant symptoms at first that eventually became debilitating. It went from like me having light periods for decades to suddenly having like uncontrollable periods that I didn't know what was going on. And as an athlete, sometimes I'd run for several hours and I wasn't able to manage that I was bleeding so uncontrollably. I wasn't recovering well from even my easiest workouts. I mean, I say I wasn't recovering well, but I was not recovering. It would take me, sometimes it felt like weeks to recover from easy workouts. I needed naps all the time. I was exhausted when I woke up. I began having memory issues where I couldn't remember an appointment I saw on my calendar only an hour before. I was having debilitating anxiety that I had never experienced before. And then, of course, same story, like a lot of women or men. My docs said I was fine, that there was nothing wrong. And, even though previously I was functioning at a very high level, they thought, oh, well, you're not doing too bad. But I'm nowhere near where I was before. So I definitely took this journey of trying to figure out things on my own. And that eventually led me to studying functional nutrition. And then from there, I ended up beginning to learn a lot about balancing blood sugar and stress and, all the things and you learn in functional nutrition, which I had already studied nutrition, so I knew a lot about it. But because I had a family history of diabetes, both my dad and my mom had diabetes. And actually I had, because of that, I had been very interested in blood sugar since I was a kid. Also because I didn't want to get diabetes, and I also wanted to help them take better care of themselves and their diabetes, which they were not that interested in doing. And now I know that they've got to want it themselves as well. but yeah, so I went down this journey of learning a lot about blood sugar and then getting really curious for myself, the connections that could have to some of what I was experiencing. Eventually, I figured out, it took some time, but I had made some connections that led me to think that, hey, maybe it's my thyroid. And I ended up working with a practitioner who had said, yes, actually it is, but it wasn't showing up when the doctors were just measuring TSH. They weren't looking at it more deeply than that. And then in addition, because I was so curious about blood sugar and I had been using blood sugar devices since I was young, I started paying a lot more attention to that, trying to get curious about what was going on with my blood sugar health. And so I started treating my thyroid. I figured out I had hypothyroidism, and then realized that some of what had been going on with me was related to stress. And well, I should say a lot of what had been going on that perhaps had led me to that thyroid journey. But certainly, it's like some of these discoveries were the things that helped me unravel my thyroid journey or my thyroid healing and heal and get better. Because at the time when I discovered that I did have something going on with my thyroid, I didn't want to go straight to medication initially. I wanted to figure out what was actually at the root of this. But also at the same time, I just wanted to take care of my body from a more holistic approach, which definitely studying functional nutrition had helped with that, but also just getting extra curious about the relationship to stress and also what was going on with my blood sugar and inflammation and all those pieces. So I had took a pretty big deep dive in that area because, like I said, I had that family history and I really wanted to better understand that piece. And that is a big part of what brought me to what I'm doing now.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing. So when talk about blood sugar, a lot of people are aware of the impact of diet, but I don't think people think enough about the stress when it comes, especially with
Yeah,
blood sugar. So if someone, let's say if someone's eating a wonderful diet, whole healthy foods, minimizing refined foods and sugars, or even completely avoiding refined foods and sugars, but they're stressed out all the time, not getting sufficient sleep, can they still have blood sugar dysregulation even if they are eating a really good diet?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I've experienced it for myself. Absolutely not getting um, quality or the quantity of sleep your body needs to recover can have an impact on your glucose levels for sure. At the same time, stress has a pretty big impact on on your blood sugar levels, separate from food. But at the same time, when you're eating while you're stressed, those foods are going to react very differently from when you have a meal and you're not stressed. So stress definitely is a huge factor when it comes to blood sugar regulation. And actually one of the biggest ones that the women that I work with actually determine that maybe it's not the food, it's maybe something else that I've been ignoring for a while or just not aware of, right? Sometimes we're
Yeah.
just not aware of the stress that we have going on in our body. And I think for me, some of the stress that I had in my particular situation, I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah. And it could go beyond the emotional stressors too. Like if someone is
Absolutely.
overtraining or other physical stressors
Absolutely.
as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are so I like to say there are a lot of different stressors, but they all go into the same bucket, right? So your stress bucket at the end of the day can have stress from all sorts of things like physical stress, mental stress, emotional stress, physiological stress that sometimes we don't consider, like infections. There could be a lot of things going on that are creating stress in our bodies, and then we add a little bit more and it just overflows our bucket. So yes.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I know when I dealt with Graves' disease, I was underestimating the impact stress had on my health
Mm.
or at the well, that, and then also overestimating how I handle the stress too. So it's double whammy there.
It's very
And
common.
yeah, exactly. And I definitely want to talk about measuring blood sugar, blood testing, talk about CGMs, but do you also recommend measuring adrenals, or do you just take the perspective, well, most people have adrenal issues, so rather than testing, just make the assumption someone has an adrenal problem?
Well, I wouldn't say I make the assumption, but um, because, well, I usually just start straight off with the biosensors and let's see what those say, because we can right away start making tweaks with them. And then later on down the road, sometimes we look more specifically into the adrenals, like say with cortisol testing is what you're
Hmm.
probably talking
Yep.
about. But usually with things like a continuous glucose monitor or with HRV, we can see already where their stress is at, and at least enough to start making some changes. And if I would say, I don't think I've ever, I don't think I've ever had anybody that I've worked with who was like, "Oh, your stress is fine." um, yeah, but of course, there can sometimes be things going on that need a closer look, such as we can see that um, through the data with the biosensors that I like to use, we can sometimes see something's going on where that maybe their cortisol, they have high cortisol in the evenings when it should actually be low, or they have low cortisol in the morning when it should actually be high. So in this case, I would probably look sooner than later. Um, and this is really just, it's not a, it's not that I don't think it's important to look at the adrenals right away. It's more that I think it can be just as effective to just start working on stress via the biosensors, and then help women start feeling better and get the results, versus going to that testing, waiting for the result to come back, and doing it in that path. So I just do it the other way around.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll definitely talk about the biosensors. Uh, what are the consequences of having blood sugar imbalances, whether it's insulin resistance, hypoglycemia?
Well, they can be different for everyone. They can be different for everyone. I would say that they show up differently in different bodies, and it could look like sluggishness or feeling like you're on an energy roller coaster. It could look like being moody and irritable, having brain fog, having cravings, especially for carbs and caffeine. It can look like waking up feeling sluggish, increased stress, feeling less resilient. It could show up feeling like you have other things going on with your hormones. Like in my case, I had very heavy periods. So you can notice changes in your menstrual cycles, or maybe you don't have a menstrual cycle at all. It can show up as skin issues. That's actually strangely, that's one of the things that women tend to see the most when they work with me and working on having better blood sugar balance, is like, oh, my skin issues have cleared up after years of struggling with this. They had just thought like this was their new norm. So it can show up in a lot of ways, actually.
Okay. And sleep, it really could have,
Oh,
getting back to
absolutely.
sleep, yeah, just, is it more common, would you say, for people with blood sugar imbalances to have problems staying asleep than falling asleep, or do you see kind of an equal, uh
I certainly see the quality of sleep. So the more dysregulated the blood sugar, usually the lower the quality of the sleep is, because the blood sugar would tend to be less stable at night if it's less stable during the day. And that instability at night actually creates poor quality sleep. So I see that a lot. Whether or not the person is getting the right quantity or going to bed easily or waking up easily, that seems to vary. But certainly, I would say if your blood sugar is dysregulated, your sleep quality is not as good as it could be, and you're likely waking up feeling sluggish. Um, and at the same time, what I notice quite often is that in the middle of the night, if you have a lot of blood sugar instability, blood sugar can tend to dip down low and wake people up in the middle of the night. I see that either dip down low or increase in the middle of the night as well, depending on, what they had for dinner or how the rest of their day went. So I can also see highs and lows happening that wake people up and disrupt sleep. So there could be a lot going on with sleep and blood sugar, actually. You probably see that too.
Yeah, definitely see a lot of disrupted sleep, poor sleep quality,
Uh-huh.
and yeah. And then let's talk a little bit about diet. You probably would agree that there's no diet that fits everyone perfectly, but there probably are some do's and don'ts that you recommend when it comes to foods that you would eat. Obviously, refined foods and sugars probably would be a no-no. But can you talk a little bit more about that? Certain foods that you recommend eating, certain foods that you recommend avoiding in general, to have healthy blood sugar?
Well, it's going to look different for every person. Yes. And a few things we know that are very supportive are whole foods. So whole foods versus processed foods versus highly refined foods, especially when it comes to carbohydrates, anything that's going to go in the blood sugar quickly. And the more refined, the more processed it is, that's usually the case, is going to raise your blood sugar more quickly, which usually leads to a blood sugar crash afterward. However, we do notice that when you pair your foods in a certain way, when you order your meals in a certain way, you can actually change that up a little bit. So sometimes it's not always about the food, but it's about how you eat the food. And even, as I said earlier, the state of your stress at the moment that you are eating the meal. So absolutely nutrition is important. And then at the same time, having fat, fiber, and protein with whatever you're eating can help quite a bit to stabilize your glucose levels. So that would mean, say you're having an apple, it might be helpful to also have some nuts with that apple. And it might even be more helpful for you to have some nuts before you have that apple, so that can help the glucose from the, once the apple is broken down, can help the glucose release slower into your bloodstream. So that can definitely be more supportive. In addition to that, usually people discover that there's this kind of carbohydrate tolerance. So fats and proteins are having less of an impact on blood sugar most of the time than, say, carbohydrates. And like I said, especially refined ones. But they're all going to react differently in your body depending on how they're prepared as well, whether they're raw or baked or blended, or all of these things do matter. But in general, if you're eating a whole food diet and you're paying attention to eat fat, fiber, and protein at the same time, you're getting lots, you're eating the rainbow, you're getting lots of different nutrients that can be supportive for blood sugar health. I notice that to be actually the most, in terms of what works for most people. I would say that can be quite helpful in helping to stabilize blood sugar.
And that's also how you use the CGMs as well. Is that correct?
Yes,
To see, like,
absolutely.
yeah, let's talk about that. So, how do you use continuous glucose monitors to determine what foods people could not get away with eating, but yeah, I guess how their body reacts from a blood sugar perspective, and then also tie that into the HRV that you use as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just as an example, before I started using these with clients, I was using, the prick monitor for years. I was also using continuous glucose monitors for myself before I started using them with clients, about 10 years ago. And I would use it also with my husband. So it was interesting to see. I have diabetes in my family, so I have the genetics for probably more likely to have blood sugar issues. And we can be so different between him and I in how our body reacts to things. Like, we've worn them together for a few months at a time, and I was always like, dang, you can eat that and your blood sugar is fine. I don't get it. So we really are so different when it comes to how our body responds to foods, but it's not just our body. It can be the environment. There are a lot of things that play inflammation in our body. what we're exposed to, like, again, how we pair and order our foods. But when we're able to wear a continuous glucose monitor, we can not only see how those things are influencing our glucose, right? We're seeing in real time. You eat an apple, you're seeing what's happening on the continuous glucose monitor when you eat an apple. And also you're not just seeing it, but you're also feeling, what does my body feel like when my blood sugar does that? So sometimes a woman will eat an apple, it'll go up to 200. I've seen this recently. And they don't feel so well. So then the next time they eat an apple with some nuts, and then it bumps up to instead 140, and they don't have that same after effect that they had when they ate it on its own. So by using a continuous glucose monitor, you can also begin to see like what sort of tweaks and tricks can work for you, and do they actually work for you? Because also I could say eat some nuts with your apple, but maybe your blood sugar is still going to spike and it's still going to have an impact and create symptoms for you. So it's really, I like to use it in a way to not say, so it's good and bad to have your blood sugar at certain levels. Yes, certain levels can be more inflammatory. I do like to have a specific range that women are in, but also we pay a lot of attention to how does that make you feel when your blood sugar does X. For some, they can have symptoms right away. They feel tired. For some, they feel cravings 30 minutes later. For some, they're like all day long, I've been tired and hungry. For some, it interrupts their sleep. So we really get to pay attention to not only what the glucose monitor is saying with your meal, but how you feel afterwards, how you feel before. And then also we get to learn what your baseline levels are. So if your baseline levels are in the healthier zone, or say that maybe in the pre-diabetes zone, we know a little bit more about if you need some more adjustments to help you get maybe into that healthier zone. And in that case, that might be some more healing protocols that help to heal your body so that it's responding better to your foods and that your baseline levels are coming down to a healthier range. So it really depends on where the person is at when they start using the continuous glucose monitors, but there's so much information that it can give you, as well as, like we said earlier, how well it's going while you're sleeping, right? So how are the foods that you're eating throughout the day, and especially at night, how is that influencing your blood sugar throughout the night, and how is that affecting your sleep? And are you waking up feeling recharged? And if you're not, are there some adjustments that you can make? And then notice at the same time how that impacts your glucose levels. And then does that help you have better sleep? So it's just about making connections with, does this help you or not? And I find that I love data. I love data. And a lot of the people I work with love data. So it can be really helpful to see it versus just feel it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, for those who are not familiar with CGMs, how do you know what your blood sugar is in the middle of the night? So you're tying it into an app,
Yeah.
correct? And
Yes.
then you can just look at like the app and see the data. Yeah, because some people are like, well, yeah, I know, like if I look at it during the day, I could tell, but how do I know like throughout the day when I'm not looking at it in the middle of the night? So if you could talk more about the app that you use.
Yeah, absolutely. So we used to just have the prick monitor, and now there's a continuous glucose monitor that monitors your glucose pretty much 24/7, especially the newest ones that have just come out. It used to be that you have 8 hours of data, and then it has to connect with an app on your phone or a little reader. But now via Bluetooth, most of them will just send the data straight to an app on your phone. And then from there, you can see continuously over 24 hours what's going on with your glucose levels. You can see it in the middle of the night, during the day. And for a lot of people, I often recommend at first to just collect the data without thinking too much about it. Let it collect in the background, and then you can go back and have a look at it initially. That can be helpful as well, because when you are looking at it, you're also in this self-editing, like you're seeing it, but you're also wanting to fix it at the same time. So it can be nice, like when you're sleeping at night to just collect the data and then see what's going on.
Okay. Now, I used a CGM for a couple of weeks, and I didn't realize when I used it that you have to use. Yeah, I think you have to have it, like you mentioned, on Bluetooth all the time. So if someone's like crazy about that and like, oh, how about the EMFs and
Yeah.
all that? Is there a way around that or not
Yes,
really?
yes,
You have.
yes. So, well, they used to have like Abbott, anyways. I use the Abbott one. Abbott used to have a 2 where you didn't need a Bluetooth, and I still use the 2. Sometimes you can still find the 2. You don't need the Bluetooth. And in that case, you have to scan it every 8 hours. So sometimes you might miss a little bit of data if you don't do that. And you can do the same thing with the one that has a Bluetooth, because I do recommend turning that off at night. Also, because it has an alarm, and you don't want the alarm waking you up at night if your glucose is going low, because chances are, if you're not a diabetic, it's not going to be life-threatening. But you can turn that Bluetooth off, and then you have to turn it back on in the morning so that it can connect and send the data. And I wouldn't also, if you're somebody that doesn't like having Bluetooth on, because I don't, I just turn it on occasionally and let it connect and send the data and then turn it back off. So you don't have to have the Bluetooth on continuously, but it is on the sensor. And I don't know a lot about, now that you've asked that question, whether or not it's still what it's doing when you have your phone off, but it's on your arm. So I will look into that.
Yeah, definitely let me know. So I'm curious about that. So how about HRV? What do you use to measure heart rate variability? And actually, if you could talk a little bit, just for those, I've had other guests talk about it, but if you maybe in a minute or two just explain what HRV is, what
Yeah.
heart rate variability is.
Yeah, so sure. Heart rate variability is a measurement of your heart, and it's the space in between the beats of your heart and how far apart they are. And we want more variability. So the more variability there is, the more, say, resilient the body is, and the less variability, the more rigid. So we want to see more variability, and that the heart rate variability is a measurement of actually your nervous system. So when we look at heart rate variability and we see heart rate variability going up or going down, and it depends on how you would use the measurement, because you can use the measurement in a number of different ways. But for example, if every day you are taking just a baseline measurement at the same time, and usually if you use a device, it'll give you your daily HRV score. You can use that score from day to day to see how well you're recovering. Are you restored? Is that number going up? Is it going down? Is it staying the same? And so that says a little bit about your stress levels in terms of how well recovered you are. So that's how I use HRV. And before I used HRV, I used heart rate. Heart rate was also a measurement that you could use to see when you wake up the next day, is your heart rate gone up? Is it the same? Has it gone down? Usually if it's gone up, it's a sign that your body isn't as well recovered. If it's gone down, it means you've recovered a little bit. Of course, it could mean other things, but if you're just using it for the measurement for how well recovered you are and what your stress levels are like, HRV can work just as well as heart rate. And it can also show us other things as well, because everybody will be different in terms of HRV, but there's like Oura Ring. I like Oura Ring. That's my personal favorite. But there's also Whoop. I have that as well, which measures HRV. Even the Apple Watch measures it, but they all measure it a little bit differently. And so a device like the Oura Ring will show you daytime HRV, what's it looking like throughout the day. So you can also see when your HRV is going high, it's typically a sign that your body is more restored and is in more of the parasympathetic relaxed state, versus when it goes low, you tend to be more in the parasympathetic, upregulated, more of a stressed state. So we can use HRV if you have access to it throughout the day to see your daytime stress. And I do like it in a similar way that I like the glucose, the glucose levels throughout the day, because it gives us some information about, hey, maybe I didn't recognize when I had that meeting that actually my HRV was way low, that and at the same time my glucose went way high. So maybe there was a stress piece involved, right? So I think that can be interesting, but if nothing less than just to tell us a little bit about how we're recovering from day to day, HRV can be quite helpful for that.
All right. And did you say Whoop, like
Yeah.
WOOP?
Uh-huh.
Is that what
Yeah.
it's? Okay.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
what is that? That's, I know what the Aura ring is, but is Whoop just like an app on your phone or?
Whoop is similar. Whoop is similar to Aura, except it's you wear it on your wrist, and
Okay.
it doesn't have a clock or any kind of face that you look at. It's actually designed for athletes, so you can do hard training with it on and it not get damaged. Well, at least as easily as, say, your more delicate Apple Watch. And it doesn't have any kind of, well, it does have Bluetooth on the Whoop as well, but I'm pretty sure you can turn it off. That is actually why I like Oura Ring the best, because it has airplane mode.
Yeah. Mhm.
But there is the Whoop, and then there is also Garmin, which has a pretty nice feature with HRV called the body battery, which for somebody who is just starting can be easy because it already takes the data like HRV and heart rate and sleep and all of that, and can give you an estimate on how well recovered you are the next day. So that could be a fun place to start for some people who are like, what is this? But I do love the Oura Ring the best.
Yeah. All right. And are those the main two biosensors you use or anything else?
So I use those two. And then the other one that I love is the HeartMath inner balance sensor.
Hmm.
Have you tried
Yep.
that?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
use that. I do use the inner balance. Yep. Love that as well.
Yeah. Because then you get that real time data when you're doing the training, right? That to see the impact that it's having, and then also the improvement that you're getting when you continue to do it.
Yeah. All right, wonderful. Now, do you rely on the CGM or do you also look at blood sugar markers like hemoglobin A1C, fasting insulin?
I typically recommend to do a fasting insulin, and you could also do an hemoglobin A1C. Why not a fasting glucose? But we can pretty much see that in no time using a CGM. The hemoglobin A1C is nice to have if you are going to go down the route of using continuous glucose monitors. You can see where you start. So it's a good baseline. And then after you've been wearing continuous glucose monitors for a while, it also gives you an estimated HbA1c, which is similar to what you would get if you had the blood work done. I do like fasting insulin levels as well as a baseline. I like to use these to test before, and then you use the continuous glucose monitor. You make adjustments that are personalized to you as you try to do the work to balance your blood sugar levels and get your baseline levels down if you need to. As you do that, then it's nice to have that to check in on later. Like, how is my insulin now after I've been doing this work? Or how is my HbA1c now? And that can be quite helpful.
Yeah, and what do you like to see the range? Like, what do you say the optimal ranges would be for hemoglobin A1C and fasting insulin?
I like to see it below hemoglobin A1, and as I'm saying this, I'm like, gosh, I always have different numbers in my head. EU and US, but I think that's the same under 5.1 for
Hmm.
hemoglobin
Okay.
A1C.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
you're saying yes, so I must have that correct.
Yep.
And
Yeah, it's
then
like like five. I think 5.6 is the upper limit. Like if it's over that, like 5.7, I think you consider like pre-diabetic. So yeah.
yeah, it's the
So
same
five.
in
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
the same EU and US. And then with fasting insulin, also under 7.
Okay.
And
So
how about you?
yeah, I would agree. I mean, some say I know Dr. Mark Hyman. I'm pretty sure he says less than 5 for
Yeah.
insulin, but I'm with you. I mean, if someone's like a 6 or 6.5, and if hemoglobin A1C is looking good, I think it's okay. That sometimes I see, I don't know if you ever see this, where insulin looks good, like insulin maybe might be a 5 or even a 4, and hemoglobin A1C is on the upper end. So it kind of contradicts each other, where hemoglobin, if someone has a hemoglobin A1C, let's say at 5.5, 5.6, but their fasting insulin is looking good. I don't know if you see that. And if so, like, do you rely more on one than the other in that scenario?
Yeah, well, it's interesting with fasting insulin because I've also tested insulin throughout the day and it can vary a lot, which is similar to glucose, right? So
Hmm.
I just get curious when I see that number, um, what else could be going, like, is that really telling me what's going on in their body throughout the day? And HbA1c is more, it's an average, so
Hmm.
it's more reliable, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and that's why I like to go and look at what's going on the CGM with their glucose levels. So if somebody is able to achieve pretty regulated glucose levels, they're in a healthy range, their baseline is in a healthy range, and their insulin is 7, I would say, and they've been able to improve tons of symptoms and feel great, I would say then they're doing all right.
Yeah.
If they don't have anything else going on, right? So
Hmm.
I look at that first. Um, but because I do sometimes, because of the rise in cortisol in the morning and probably some other things that are going on in the morning, um, women's blood sugar can be moving up a little bit where the rest of their glucose levels are stable and nice and beautiful and not creating symptoms for the rest of the day. And I've also experienced where I rode my bike to go get my blood work done. And so different factors are going to affect it differently, right? Like if you're riding your bike, um, and maybe you're a little bit stressed out as you're, like you're quickly riding there through traffic, whatnot, your insulin level might look different versus if you were just
Hmm.
sitting at home when you woke up that morning. So I don't really pay attention to it as much as I do as with the continuous glucose monitors, which can give me a lot more information.
Okay. And then fasting. I'm sure you get a lot of questions about fasting, intermittent fasting. How helpful can intermittent fasting be for someone who has a condition such as insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes?
Well, I think fasting can be helpful, and I have also seen it not be helpful. I have experienced that for myself. When I was actually going through that thyroid journey, trying to figure things out, I had been gaining quite a bit of weight. I decided I wanted to try fasting. I tried keto. I tried several things actually. When I noticed that my blood sugar was very dysregulated, and it made it even more dysregulated because there was a stress factor going on that I hadn't quite yet recognized, and it had to create, and those things were creating more stress in my body. So usually I recommend it to people when I feel that they have gotten a little bit of better control over their glucose levels and also their stress, so that we're not adding more stress. And then I usually like to use a continuous glucose monitor while they're doing it, so we can also see the impact that it's having. Is it positive? Is it negative? Because fasting too long for women in particular, especially when they're menstruating, we can see a lot of negative effects on the glucose
Yeah.
monitor. And so I would say it's very personal. And the ones that tend to have more success, in my experience, tend to be the ones that are already on the healthier side in terms of metabolic health. But also, I think maybe because we're on a thyroid podcast here, I'd love to know what you think. But also, I would say that for those people who do have a history of thyroid health issues, that I would find it much less supportive. How have you experienced that?
Well, like you, I think it depends on the person. And I will say, I also, I mean, I do work with people who have Hashimoto's, but I also work with a lot of people with hyperthyroidism and
Yeah.
Graves. So,
Uh-huh.
like, I know when I dealt with Graves, I lost 42 pounds. I definitely would not have wanted to incorporate intermittent fasting at
Yeah.
that time. And then also my adrenals were taxed. I mean, there were a number of reasons why I don't
Yeah.
think I would have been a good candidate for intermittent fasting back then. And but yeah, I would say it depends on the person. I mean, I do agree that some people, they do it extremely. Like I've had people just doing it on their own where they're fasting for 20 hours and they only have a 4-hour eating window. So the question is, I mean, first of all, the stress that's putting on their body on a
Mhm.
day in, day out basis and potentially on their thyroid. But then are they getting enough protein? Are they getting enough nutrients just
Exactly. Yes.
overall?
Yeah.
But as far as a 16/8 fast, which is pretty popular, again, I think it depends on the person. I can't say that I recommend for most of my patients to fast. Like to me, it's like if someone's in a good state of health and they want to do it on a wellness routine, that's one thing. When someone's healing, and I
Yeah.
know I'm not saying it can't help with healing. I've had Cynthia Thurlow and other intermittent fasting experts on the podcast, and so I'm sure many would say it will help with the healing. It'll help with autoimmunity. And again, there is a time and place for that, but it's I think it's really individualized. It does
Yeah.
depend on the person. And but you bring up a good point with the continuous glucose monitor, just another way to see from at least from a blood sugar perspective how their body is handling it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then HRV is helpful there too, right? Is it increasing stress
Yeah.
or is it helping you recover? Because if it's not getting better, if HRV is going down, then that's a sign that healing is not going up.
Yeah.
So I do look at that as well. And to your point about nutrition, absolutely. When women are fasting and they're trying to heal and they're not getting enough nutrition, they're not getting the nutrients they need for that healing, then fasting is not typically working very well.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely agree. So before we wrap this up, I have one more question that you probably won't be able to answer. But so I know you use HRV, but when are they going to come out with continuous cortisol monitors?
I'm looking forward to that. I also think continuous insulin monitors would be amazing, but I think I
Yeah.
heard recently that that's probably not happening for some reason,
Oh,
which I don't remember. Um, but yes, I do not know. That would be amazing,
yeah.
and at the same time, I think we're getting into a period where these are going to become more and more available to us, and I think it's very cool, actually. And I think it's really cool. I think it's even better when you can work with a practitioner who really knows how to use these tools, because a lot of us have access to them. Like a lot of people have access to HRV and other metrics on their watch, and they don't really know what to do with them or how supportive it could be. So it is nice to go down the avenue of learning about it for yourself. But wouldn't that be great if we had a continuous cortisol monitor?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe in the near future. I mean, it wouldn't be a shocker with all the technology they have coming out. So yeah, stay tuned, I guess. But yeah, so for those who are looking to learn even more about balancing blood sugar, learning how to use CGMs, HRV, where can they find out more about you, Laurie?
Yeah, I would. My recommendation would be to go to take one of my quizzes because you can easily get to my site by typing in yourhormonequiz.com, or even better, yourbloodsugarquiz.com, because this conversation is about blood sugar and you might want to go check out how your blood sugar is doing and take the quiz, and then you'll get all my mailing lists. You'll get all the details on how you can stay in touch. Or you could also visit me at yourbetterbalanceblueprint.com. You can find me there as well.
All right, wonderful. Of course, we will make sure to include those links in the show notes, and thank you so much. I mean, this is
Yeah.
probably, I've had other people talk about blood sugar, but definitely this is the most we've gone in depth with regards to the continuous glucose monitors, and it was great also tying it into the HRV. So this was, I think, a wonderful conversation. And again, appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much. Yeah, lovely being here, and wishing you and your audience all the best.
All right, thanks. Same to you, Laurie.
Thank you.